There is a way to pay off your credit cards that is mathematically wrong. It costs you more money. Every spreadsheet, every calculator, every finance bro with a whiteboard will tell you not to do it. And yet, when researchers actually followed thousands of real people trying to dig out of debt, the people using the wrong method were more likely to actually finish. Let me say that again because it breaks your brain a little. The slower, more expensive, mathematically inferior strategy got more people all the way out of debt. That is the paradox we are unpacking today. And by the end, you're going to know exactly which method to pick for your own situation. I am Slime Johnson. Let us get into it. Here is the setup. Say you have $8,000 in credit card debt. That is a scenario number, not your number, but it is in the right neighborhood. The average cardholder in this country is carrying somewhere between $6,500 and $6,800, depending on whose data you read. TransUnion clocked the average balance around $6,580 in early 2025, climbing to roughly $6,715 by the fourth quarter. Experian put it near 6,735 in the middle of the year. So 8,000 spread across a few cards is a totally realistic mess to be in. Now you have two famous ways to attack it. Method 1 says be a robot. Pay the card with the highest interest rate first, no matter the balance, because that is the rate bleeding you the most. That is the avalanche. It is what the math demands. Method 2 says be a human. Pay the smallest balance first, knock out a whole card, feel the win, and roll that payment into the next smallest. That is the snowball. It is what your gut wants. One of these is optimal on paper, the other one is the one more people actually finish. Today we figure out why and what that means for the 8,000 staring you down. Part 1, let us rewind, because the rules of this game were not always fair, and the history matters. For decades, credit card companies played dirty with how they applied your payments. If you had a card with one balance at a low promotional rate and another chunk at a brutal cash advance rate, and you paid extra, guess where that extra money went? To the low rate balance. The expensive debt just sat there, compounding, while your overpayment chipped away at the cheap stuff. It was designed to keep you paying interest as long as possible. That changed in May of 2009. President Obama signed the Credit Card Accountability, Responsibility and Disclosure Act into law on May 22nd, and the core rules took effect February 22nd, 2010. Two pieces matter for our story. First, the act says that any payment you make above the minimum has to be applied to your highest interest rate balance first, then down the line. Read that again. The law itself now structurally favors paying off your highest rate first on a single card. The avalanche method got a legal tailwind written right into federal statute. Second, the act locked in the grace period. Issuers have to get your statement to you at least 21 days before the due date, and if they offer a grace period, it has to be at least 21 days. Pay your statement balance in full inside that window, and you owe zero interest on new purchases. That 21-day rule is the single most underrated piece of consumer protection on your card, and most people have no idea it exists. So before this video even gets to the snowball versus avalanche fight, understand the board you are playing on was rewritten in your favor in 2009. The math optimal path is not fighting the system anymore. The system was bent toward it. Part 2. So if the law itself nudges you toward highest rate first, why does anyone use the other method? Here is where the data gets uncomfortable for the spreadsheet crowd. In 2012, two researchers, David Gal and McShane, published a study in the Journal of Marketing Research called Can Fighting Small Battles Help Win the War? They got their hands on the records of around 6,000 real people working through a debt management program, real humans, real balances, real outcomes. And they asked a simple question. What actually predicts whether someone finishes and gets debt free? Was it the fraction of dollars they paid down? No. The strongest predictor was the fraction of accounts they closed. The people who knocked out whole accounts, smallest balances first, were the ones who crossed the finish line. Now let me be honest about the size of this effect, because the internet has mangled it. You will see blog posts screaming 78% of snowball users finish versus 52% for avalanche. Those exact numbers are made up. They trace back to no study. What the actual research found was a relative bump in your odds. Starting with the small balances made someone about 14% more likely to be debt-free after 1 year, and that edge grew to roughly 43% more likely by year 4. That is not a fake precise stat. That is the real one, and it is still a big deal. A separate line of research backs it up. A study by Alexander Brown and Joanna Lahey, called Small Victories, and later coverage featured in Harvard Business Review, found the same thing in controlled experiments. Closing something completely, getting a clean win, lights up your motivation to keep going in a way that grinding on a big abstract number just does not. That is the snowball paradox in one sentence. The method that is worse on paper is better in practice, because the thing that actually beats debt is not math. It is not quitting. Quick thing before we go deeper. I built a free debt payoff cheat sheet for exactly this decision, snowball versus avalanche, laid out so you can plug in your own cards and see which one fits you. Link is below. It is free. Grab it. Part 3. Now let us get under the hood. Because to make a smart call, you have to understand the enemy, how the interest actually eats you. Credit card interest is not a once a year thing. It compounds daily. Here is the machine. Your card has an annual rate, your APR. The issuer takes that APR and divides it by 360 or 365, depending on the issuer, to get a daily periodic rate. Every single day, they multiply that tiny daily rate by what you owe and they add it to your balance. So tomorrow you are paying interest on today's interest. Day after day, the balance you are charged on creeps up. Most issuers run this against your average daily balance across the whole billing cycle. It is small each day, and that is exactly why it is dangerous. It is quiet, and the rates right now are not quiet. As of early 2026, the average rate across all card accounts sits right around 21%, per the Federal Reserve's own consumer credit data. For accounts actually being charged interest, it is closer to 21.5%. And brand new card offers are averaging north of 22%. 21% compounding daily on $8,000. That is the avalanche's whole argument. If one of your cards is sitting at the top of that range and another is near the bottom, the high rate card is the one setting fire to your money every single day. Kill the fire first. Mathematically, that is unarguable. The avalanche minimizes the total interest you hand over. Full stop, because it always attacks the most expensive dollar in the room. Part 4. So here is the practical part. Which one do you actually pick? The honest answer is it depends on the gap, and you should run the numbers before you commit to feeling smart. Here is the trap. People assume the avalanche saves you thousands. Usually it does not. LendingTree ran 4 real-world scenarios in comparing the two methods head to head. The difference in total interest, it ranged from $0 to about $1,300. In one realistic mixed debt case of around $100,000, the avalanche saved a grand total of $29. 29. On a $15,000 cards only load, it saved about $230. You only get a multi-thousand-dollar gap when you deliberately build a scenario with huge balances and a giant spread between your highest and lowest rates. For most people, the gap between the optimal method and the human method is a rounding error. So here is the decision rule. Look at your cards. If your interest rates are all bunched close together, the avalanche barely saves you anything. So just take the snowball, take the wins, take the momentum. The few bucks you give up is cheap insurance against quitting. But if you have one card with a wildly higher rate than the rest, a big nasty balance bleeding at the top of that 22% range, then the avalanche actually saves real money, and you should grit your teeth and kill that one first. The right answer is not a personality. It is a calculation, and it takes about 5 minutes. Part 5. Here is the honest take. Here is what I would actually do. I would run avalanche if and only if the math gap is big enough to matter, and I mean big enough that I would feel it. If killing my top rate card first saves me a few $100 or more over the payoff, fine, I am a robot for a year, I attack the expensive one, and I bang the difference. The law is already pushing my extra payments there on a single card anyway. But if the gap is $29, $30 over the whole journey, I am not setting my financial life on fire over a pizza's worth of interest. I am taking the snowball. I am paying off a whole card in month 2, feeling that win, and using that feeling as fuel, because the data is screaming at me that finishing is the only thing that actually matters. And here is the part nobody selling you a system wants to admit. The best debt method is the one you will not abandon in month 4 when you are tired and life punches you in the face. The behavioral edge is real precisely because most people quit. The snowball is not dumb. It is engineered for the actual human doing the actual work. The avalanche is not heartless. It is just optimized for a person who never wavers. Be honest about which person you are. That self-knowledge is worth more than any spreadsheet. Pick the method that matches the human, not the one that matches the math, unless the math is genuinely large, in which case let it win. That is not a cop-out. That is the whole answer. Let me bring it home. $8,000, 2 paths. The avalanche is mathematically optimal because it kills your highest rate first. And on a single card, the card act already routes your extra payment there. The snowball is behaviorally optimal because closing whole accounts keeps real people from quitting. And the research, Gal and McShane on 6,000 real borrowers, says that is what actually predicts finishing. The gap between them is usually small. The gap between finishing and quitting is everything. So do 2 things today. First, grab the free debt payoff cheat sheet in the link below. List out your cards, your balances, your rates, and find out in 5 minutes whether your gap is $29 or $1,300. That tells you which method is yours. Then, if you want the whole battle plan, the payoff order, the trackers, the scripts to call and ask for a lower rate, I put it all in the slime debt killer for 14 bucks, linked below the cheat sheet. It is the cheapest $14 you will spend if it stops you from quitting. But hear me on this. You do not need to buy anything to start. Pick a method tonight. Pay $1 extra tomorrow. The system was rewritten in your favor in 2009. The data tells you exactly how to not quit, and none of it is hidden behind a paywall or a guru. This stuff was never supposed to be a secret. Regular people, real wealth, no gatekeeping.